Principal Matters Podcast, episode 404. Hi, friends. This is Will Parker, host of Principal Matters, the School Leaders Podcast, where each week we bring you inspiring, innovative, and imaginative ideas for your own school leadership. This week, I'm back with my co-host, Dr. Jen Schwanke, Deputy Superintendent in Dublin City, Ohio. Jen Schwanke, welcome back to Principal Matters. It's been a while since our listeners have heard our voices together.
Well, it has. And we've been interviewing so many cool people, so much out there, a lot of people doing such great work. And then we should tell our listeners that you and I think our airplanes crossed in the air or something. We were both in Louisville doing some work with some principals there. Not really airplanes because I drove, but I think you flew, right?
You were there.
Yeah.
The day before I was presenting, and then I was supposed to fly in. I haven't even told you this story. And I got up that morning and got the notice from the airline that the flight had been delayed. And I was like, oh boy, here it comes. And then it got delayed again. And then on the third delay, I realized I'm not going to make my connecting flight.
Mm-hmm.
And I opened the map and realized I am 9 hours of drive from my location. So I drove to Louisville. I canceled my flight, drove to Louisville, Kentucky, which then gave me an excuse. Some listeners may not know that I grew up in Northwest Tennessee, which is only 4 hours south of Louisville, the town I grew up in. So after 2 days in Louisville, Kentucky, I went back home for a few days.
Nice.
Time on the farm, seeing my brothers, spending some time on the lake, and seeing my sweet grand nephews and niece. And it was a joy. So,
well, that's called making lemonade out of lemons. That's great. And Louisville was lovely. Like we both worked with sort of the same group of principals, but what a lovely, I would say little town, but it's a city, legit city. And
it's a great city.
Wonderful
Well, by
people.
the time this recording comes out, you and I will have also, you will have done PD in Canada. I'm going to be in Austin, Texas, where I'm going to have celebrated the graduation of my daughter who's going to school in Wales. So this recording is scheduled to come out in July or sometime in the summer, Jen. And so it's hard for me to put my mind there because we're recording this when people are out of school. And but I want to speak to the experience, to a question that came to me back in the spring when I spent a day with 21 assistant principals in Charlotte, North Carolina. And at the end of that training, I asked them to write exit ticket questions. I took those questions and in true Will fashion, tried to combine them into more complicated questions because every time you and I have done one of these, we've sat on the words for so long that we do answer it. So I'm not even trying to give us more than one question, but we're going to talk today about performance management and expectations for listeners who want a topic right now to hear. And I want to read the question and first just give you an opportunity to respond before I jump in. But here's how I put this question together from a couple of different principals who asked the same question. How can a new principal monitor and ensure adherence to expected standards and outcomes in a way that's supportive and not punitive and fosters a culture of accountability? So I know you and I love to park on words. So I'll let you start with a few thoughts from Jen.
I'm always tempted to say, no, you go. And then you say, no, you go. No, you go. As I read this question, and you and I actually talked about it offline several months ago, and this is a very heavy question, right? So this question is about monitoring adherence to expected standards and outcomes. But then the question says, I want to be supportive. I don't want to be punitive. And I want to foster a culture of accountability. And it seems a little bit like an oxymoron there.
Mm-hmm.
You want to foster a strong culture, but accountability and expectations, in my mind anyway, are words that kind of raise my blood pressure a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think it's about mindset and your intentions. What I wrote down on my notes is, well, are you leading with an intent to be supportive rather than punitive? That's the first question, right?
Yeah.
Well,
yeah. No, that is an important question because, and I think you're the same way, Jen. Whenever I think about the question of a leader coming into work with teachers, first thing I have to ask myself is, as a teacher, what kind of attitude and expectations did I want on the other side of me from my principal or my leader? And so obviously, I mean, we all want standards and accountability. I think the tension that I'm hearing here is ensuring it in a way that's supportive, not punitive, but fosters a culture of. In other words, how do I hold people accountable without them thinking I'm a jerk?
Right,
So,
right,
so yeah,
exactly.
so maybe we should word it that way. And with that mindset, what kind of suggestions would you give?
Well, and I think in my career, I'm pushing 3 decades pretty hard now. And I think things have changed a little bit in terms of how the world looks at principals and how principals look at themselves. I may be wrong. Somebody can write to us and correct me, but do I think that the principal role used to be the manager? It used to be someone who made sure that um, things happened as expected. And now we know that teachers and students respond much better to a culture of understanding and care and compassion. And that doesn't mean, look the other way while everybody does whatever they want. I think it means putting people first and getting yourself into a place where you can see where people are so that you can put them first. So that's pretty heavy, but I guess, I used to think of a principal as saying, just to use the most basic example that comes to my mind is, you need to be at work at 8:05 and you need to have your grades in the system by Friday at 4 and turn in your lesson plans and they need to look like this. Whereas now I think it's more wise to lead in a place of, okay, you need to be here at 8:05, but let me know if that's going to be a struggle for you so we can work out something else. Your grades are due at 4 because that's when the system's going to run them. But let's start thinking about how that can get done and what work can happen ahead of time and so on. I think it's a lot less punitive, but what the way that happens is by getting your mind out of the place of being punitive and getting it into the place of being helpful.
I agree. And you and I have talked a lot about systems solutions and people solutions
Right.
because both are happening at the same time. So what
Exactly.
I hear you saying is, okay, let's lean into the people part of that, which is, as you said, care, compassion, and understanding. So this is a place where you're safe. It's a place where you belong. It's a place where you're believed in. It's a place where you're going to be treated like a professional. All of those things are important things for us to keep in mind because that's a place we want to work. And you can look at the data on whether it's an industry or business, people work in places where they feel those kinds of experiences. They work there and like it. People that don't have those kinds of environments dread going to work and they're less engaged in their work. The other thing that people report in their job satisfaction surveys is their leaders. If they feel like this person doesn't believe in me or trust me, or they treat me in ways that are unkind or unsafe, they're going to be looking for someplace else to go. So I think you're right that you have to begin with the heart in the right place. Let's assume that the heart's in the right place. Then what do we do to make sure that our systems, because I'm coming back to monitoring and ensuring, that people are. So let's talk a little nitty gritty, or what are some of the things that principals should keep in mind that might help create the structures for that kind of care.
Right, right. And I'm glad you brought up, Will, I'm really glad you brought up our past conversations about systems because I think I have said before, systems are more important than people. And the systems have to support the people. So it's not about one being more important than the other. So thank you for saying that. You said they're working at the exact same time.
Mhm.
And that I think what this question implies is this that the system is strong but maybe not. Maybe
Mhm.
the system isn't strong, which led to this question. Why am I struggling to hold people accountable? Why am I struggling with the clarity of my expectations? Well, maybe because you don't have the system set up that does those things for you. And
Mhm.
so this question does strike me as a systems question rather than a people question. And that's okay. I'm glad that this was an exit ticket question I think it's a lot to unpack. And I think it really gets to the root of what a lot of principals struggle with. So think about your work as a principal and how did you find a solution here?
Yeah. Well, I'm always going to begin by thinking of my school through the eyes of a kid or a student. So, since you and I are, recording this as folks are stepping into a new year, of course, for many people, this will be summer, but they'll be getting ready to step into a new year. I just want you to imagine your first day of school. And let me just pick two students, Jen. I'm going to pretend I'm Lisa. And Lisa is stepping into school from a situation where she doesn't have a lot of family support. And maybe she wasn't even able to show up for student orientation. And so she shows up for her first day of school unprepared, lost, unsure of what her location is. And the school's kind of unprepared too, because there's not a place when she steps in to know like where to go because I'm late to school. So she wanders into the office with about 20 other kids who don't know where they're supposed to be. And they're all lined up trying to get their schedules printed. They give her a schedule, but nobody gives her a map. Nobody gives her directions. So then she wanders down the hall and she finds her way into what she thinks is first period. She's sitting there listening to the teacher talk, who didn't even welcome her to the classroom, when she realizes about 10 minutes through she's in the wrong classroom. So she gets up and goes down the hall, finds a bathroom, and cries until the next bell rings because she was unprepared and the school was unprepared for her. So I'm painting this picture of
Mm-hmm.
a school experience where the people and the systems were both wanting. Now I want you to imagine that, let's say, Tyler is he's there for the orientation because his folks make sure he's got the supports he needs. He's there early. His school is one of those schools that sets up meetings in advance for kids to get fresh with the school and walk their schedules through. But even if he had been late and not able to attend that on the first day of school, they also reprinted everybody's schedules in advance and had them ready and alphabetized and sitting at a place in the commons area where they could be found if they came in and they had lost theirs or were unsure where to go. And they have signage all over the building where you can know what hall you're in, what teachers are, what room numbers to go to. Every teacher standing in front of their door, greeting kids and bringing them into class. And when they get into class, they always have their names up on the board of who the teacher is. And most of the teachers have assigned seating and a folder waiting for them with their name on it and something they can do as soon as they're sitting down. And so Tyler's like, man, I know where I'm at. I know what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm welcome. I feel like I belong because the people in the systems matched that specific need. So, Jen, you know what I'm doing here. I'm asking you as leaders, listeners, to think about your school through the eyes of your students. Then do that through the eyes of your teachers. Then do that through the eyes of your parents. And ask yourself, now that I'm responsible for a campus community, an entire school community, how am I making sure that my community members know where they are, where they're supposed to be, they have the things in place that are necessary to support them, and the people there ready to have answered as many questions as possible before they even showed up. So that's where I start first.
Right. And it's so doable. What I think about is I'm on faculty at a not faculty, I'm a graduate instructor, but a very, very, very large university near my home, very large, 60,000 students. And every year they have an orientation for 8,000 students. Like you would think that is a train wreck. It is an absolute mess, right? Well, now having experienced orientation for a niece, it is like the most smooth workflow you have ever seen. It's shocking how 1 in 8,000 can walk out and say, I know my advisor, I know my schedule, I know where to go, I have 4 friends, I know my roommate. It can be done. But I think a lot of school principals, and I would even wager a bet that it's sometimes trickier with smaller schools or rural schools who haven't had a lot of turnover or don't need to adjust and adapt in terms of technology and systems. Sometimes it's harder then to break free of what's worked for a long time, just as it's hard for larger school districts to, move a very large machine in a different direction. But so it's hard for everyone.
Yeah.
But it can be done. And I think what you did in your example there, Will, is you got us to the root, which is the student. what is that experience like for the student? So if the counselor's office says, oh, this is really complicated, or if whoever would be in charge of making the sign says, I don't know if we can make those signs, you have to get back to, yeah, but if we do, it's better for the students. It'll keep Lisa from going in the restroom and crying.
Yeah.
We've got to follow the workflow from the student. And then to tie back to this question, how does the principal hold someone accountable without being punitive? I think what you do
Yeah.
is you look at the system and the process, and you can then pinpoint where it broke down. So for Lisa, she didn't even know what room to go into. That's a breakdown. Maybe we need to put signs on all the teachers' doors that say this is Mr. Parker's room. It's rather than say who blew this and heads are going to roll or any of that, we can say, oh, well, that's where the breakdown is. Let's fix that problem.
Let's take a moment to thank our sponsors, and then we'll be right back. As a school leader, you have a vision of a thriving, supportive educational environment where every teacher and student can succeed. With DigiCoach, you can turn that vision into reality. Imagine walking into a classroom with DigiCoach on your mobile device. Its customizable look-fors and pre-written feedback statements streamline your feedback process, saving you precious time. You're not just observing, you're actively supporting your teachers while generating data to drive instructional change. With the new coaching plan feature, you can effortlessly document action plans and coaching conversations. This ensures every teacher is supported and you can track their progress related to your campus goals. DigiCoach empowers you to customize the platform to fit your specific needs, reinforcing your vision at every step. And when you need support, the DigiCoach team becomes your team, with consulting efforts focused on realizing your organization's goals. By using DigiCoach, you lead your school to remarkable progress. Ready to turn your vision into reality? Visit digicoach.com and tell them that Will Parker sent you. Everyone talks about the power of data-driven instruction, but what does that actually look like? Look no further than IXL, the ultimate online learning and teaching platform for K-12. IXL gives you meaningful insights that drive real progress, and research can prove it. Studies in nearly all 50 states show that schools that use IXL outperform other schools on state tests. Educators who use IXL love that they can easily see how their school is performing in real time to make better instructional decisions. And IXL doesn't stop at just data. IXL also brings an entire ecosystem of resources for your teachers with a complete curriculum, personalized learning plans, and so much more. It's no wonder that IXL is used in 95 of the top 100 school districts. Ready to join them? Visit IXL.com/PM to get started. Yeah. And then I think what I would ask a leader to do is apply that same perspective of what is it like to be a kid in your school to what is it like to be a new teacher in your school. And
Right.
I ran into this when, years ago when our youngest child ended up hospitalized. And so we were stuck there while he was recovering, which praise God for his good recovery. But I was in the hallway one day looking for coffee or something, and I saw this hospital administrator. At least he looked like one. He was like in a doctor um, white jacket. He was leading a group of people through, and he was giving them some kind of orientation. He was just like, okay, if you'll notice, here's the break room, and then over here is the copy room. And I was watching him, and the little light bulb went off in my head, and I was like, when have I done that for my new teacher orientation? Like, how many times have they come in and you're like, here's your keys, and I'll see you at the meeting, and they don't even know where the copy room is, or they don't even, and so they spend their first 2 months trying to find everything. And so I started embedding into my summer, like, okay, when the new teachers come back, first, let's give them more orientations like we do kids. Let's show them where everything is. Let's walk them through the school. Let's give them a taste of like, this is what this office does, and this is what this office does. And then the same question when you have your faculty back, what kind of first meeting do you want to have with them? Do you want them confused? Or do you want them walking in knowing where they are and what's going on, and they got something in their hands and they're ready to go? And so we have to model the things that we want to see our teachers do too. So this is a huge question to ask: how do you monitor and ensure expected standards and not be punitive, but be supportive in a culture of accountability? But for me, it all begins with that basic question of how do you want to be treated? You put yourself on the other side of the people you're serving. If you're new in a setting, it may take you a while to figure out how to do that. But if if you have experience, which most of us do, stepping into leadership, you'll have a pretty good idea of the basic things you need to do to make sure people feel that sense of belonging and orientation when they're stepping into the work.
Right. And that goes to the question too of expectations. So if an expectation isn't met, I think it's easy to think, okay, who didn't meet my expectations? I'm going to go to that person. I'm going to find out why. Whereas again, it's a mindset shift to think, okay, a ball got dropped. I need to go see why, not who, but why. And then you go and you say, okay, this is kind of, there's a little bit of a hole in the bucket here. Things fell through. Why did that happen? And then the answer might be, oh, I wasn't sure I needed to do that. Or it wasn't clear to me. It wasn't communicated to me. I forgot. I had this other pile of things I needed to get to, whatever. And then that's the weak point, right? That's the weak point in the chain that you can fill up. Now, I also think it's worth noting that wonderful phrase, stop expecting people to be you. I used to fall in that trap a lot as an administrator because the way I would have handled a problem or proactively worked out a potential problem, when someone did it differently, I would think that meant my expectations weren't met because my expectations, of course, were what I would do. And it's so freeing to be able to break out of that and just say, okay, people are not me. Other people, no one else is me. And the way they do it might be perfectly fine. It might not be a broken expectation. It just might be a different way. You smiled when I started
Oh
saying
my
that. So
gosh,
tell
I'm
me
so glad
more.
you said that. So, no, but the great thing about stop expecting people to be you, and I run into this even in my trainings with leaders, is people want to be told how to do the work.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not afraid of getting into the nitty-gritties with you. I can give you lots of examples of how to do the work. I'm much more interested in you doing the work that fits your situation, your temperament, your personality, and your leadership style. So I'm so glad you said that. Stop expecting people to be you means, for instance, if I'm modeling for teachers an engaging staff meeting because I want them to be engaging in their own instruction, I don't expect them to do just what I just did. That would, because they're not me. So thank you for saying that, Jen, because I think it's important for, especially in school cultures where a lot of people feel like historically we have threatened the autonomy of teachers by introducing so much accountability. We don't throw the accountability out of the window because it's threatening autonomy. Instead, what we have to do, again, you and I, it seems like everything we talk about is two sides of the same coin.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You have to have both. You have to be able to respect the autonomy and the individual's characteristics of each person you're working with, while at the same time holding them to a standard that all of us can agree is a norm. So this is the way we treat kids. This is how we meet the learning standards that we have, but it's going to be a little different for you than it might be in my classroom or your classroom because we're not the same people.
Right. Right. We referenced that we had been in Louisville. One of the folks I talked to there after the session was over, she came up to me and she said, you kind of modeled a couple conversations you would have. And she said, it would never sound like that when I said it though. And I said, then you're not trying to mimic me. Don't try to mimic me. Take the spirit of what you want to say. Don't follow my words because I'm not you and you're not me. So how would you say that if you wanted to get that message across? What words would you use? And I felt a little bit like she was relieved when I said, don't do it my way, do it yours.
Yeah.
But we need to give principals permission. Again, two sides of the same coin. We need to give them permission to be authentic and be themselves and adhere to the expectations that they need in their own way and stop expecting people to be who they are.
So, I'm going to flip back to the other side of the coin for a little bit and talk
We're
about
driving our listeners crazy, Will.
yeah, because it's both. Because with the people, then there's the system side. So I do want to just say a few things to leaders who maybe, as you're looking into your year and you're thinking about the management part of what you do, and like it or not, even though leaders are not just managers, we have to have some sense of how to manage performance. I like to say it this way. Would you rather define the um, the expectations that you have for the people that you're serving and leading, Or would you rather spend your time correcting performance that was never defined?
Right.
I would rather define it and then be able to support it than to constantly be having to define for people something I never talked about with them. So to get really practical, what I mean by that is, and most people have these things embedded anyway, but in case you need a good reminder, um, practical things, student handbooks, faculty handbooks, evaluation calendars, extra duty assignments, first day of school procedures. And you can go through the list, Jen, entry exit plans, cafeteria monitoring, all those things that may be like no brainers, they actually may not have been defined somewhere. There may need to be something that you have understood, especially if you're a new leader stepping in, or if you have new people joining your team, that those things are clear so that
Right.
everybody has clarity around the systems to make those things happen.
Well,
Like,
and note to new principals, because there's a lot of them probably listening to this as the school year starts. You don't need to do this all at once. Every school has systems in place because it's the way that's always been done. So it's okay to ride that pony all over town, for as they say. Like, don't go in and say, okay, I have to do a whole new master schedule and I have to figure out a whole new duty schedule. And you probably don't. As a
right.
matter of fact, probably just watch, look, listen for a year, see what those weak areas are, see where it is that your expectations aren't being met, and then audit the expectation itself to see if it's a reasonable one, see if you're going to be able to make some systemic change, and if you even want to, and take your time, because you're right. Well, there's so many things that we have in place to make sure our schools move smoothly, but I sometimes feel like new principals think they have to be in charge of all those things day one. Likely not. There's likely a deep culture of how things are done. And anybody who's taken over a new school, even if they're a very, very experienced principal, they spend their first year going, "Oh, huh. Oh, that's how that gets done. Huh. Who knew?" And they learn from that. And then obviously someone hired them to oversee and likely improve a lot of those systems.
Well, Jen, as we're wrapping up, I just want to say a few things to Principal Matters listeners. And I know we're going to cut this short because you and I are actually both getting ready to jump into something else here after we have this conversation. But I just want to say, for those that are listening to this at the time of its release and you have some time to prepare for school, um, it's hard sometimes, I think, to put ourselves back into the skin of our kids and students. But I do think sometimes you can do, um, I would just call it, you know, do your own inventory.
Mhm.
Get out of a get out of your car the next time you're stepping into your school and walk into it as if you're looking at it for the first time. What are the things that you see as you're stepping into the school? Um, what is the condition of your flower beds and the front door decor and the front office as you're stepping in? You know, if you were visiting your school for the first time, would you be treated like a guest or a visitor or an intruder? Because, how do people welcome the folks walking in? How clear are the directions and the ability to get around your building? And the same thing applies for your digital presence. How updated is your website? When have you sent out a newsletter welcoming people back? What kind of communication are you having with the community at large, whether you're in a big community where things maybe are on the marquee, or maybe you've sent something out to the local newspaper, or maybe you've even invited the news station in. But what are ways that you can um, step into that school with fresh eyes so that you are seeing the school from the perspective of your kids? Um, Jen, I don't normally do this while I'm recording a podcast, but for some reason, my wife wants to jump into this
Oh,
recording. Um,
yay. Come on, Missy.
well,
I know.
Emily may or may not edit this, Missy. So here we go.
Oh, please,
So
please edit this. No, when Jack, no, I can't help but think about when Jack and I went to orientation at Tulsa Community College. Jack
Right.
is our wonderful son. And there was one of the counselors who was waiting in line with us, and he was kind of talking to people too, but he was explaining that he is a counselor and he was going through the orientation as if he was a
Mm,
student.
Mm.
So talk about getting behind the eyes of a student. So anyway, thank you for letting me interrupt.
Well, wait. Okay, wait. I have a few thoughts. First of all, that's like undercover boss, right? That's what they do. You know, if you're running a hamburger chain, you better go flip some hamburgers, right? And so I love that counselor doing that. And second of all, Missy, you have a very radio voice. I don't know why you're not on. Why is she not on more podcasts? She has a very
Well,
soothing
so
voice.
okay, so note of for Will, 404th episode, the first time she's ever spoken up during one of my recordings. So
And
Jen,
it
you
was
know we've
good.
arrived. We've
Right.
arrived, and it was golden.
It was
Okay, so-
golden.
Yeah, so thank you, Missy. For anyone who wants like a bonus,
Yes.
like you want to see Missy and you want to be able to like interact with her, we might set up a separate account just for.
Well, it's like a bonus track that Taylor Swift puts out. It's like
Yeah.
we dropped it there.
We dropped it.
Yeah.
Today was the Missy bonus. Here's another funny Missy that Jen and I run into in this podcast episode is we both have jacks.
Yeah.
So Jen and her husband have a jack. We have a jack. So
We're starting college visits very soon, and I'm gonna draw from inspiration of all you people that have gone before. I'm gonna remind myself it can be done.
Well, as that's a perfect way to wrap up this
Yes.
episode, Missy Parker. So thank you for jumping in there. So yeah, not only think about your eyes through your school through the eyes of kids. How about be a kid? Jump
Right.
into one of their situations. I have a good friend who's now an assistant suit, Jen. Her name is Kim Cootie, and she was the principal at Glenpool High School, south of Tulsa. And each year she would be a student for the day. So she would pick one kid each year that she would show up at their bus stop and shadow them all day long. And she told me that's the tiredest I ever am all year long is the day I shadow my kids. But she always came away with it with something like, we need to stop doing this and we need to start doing this because she saw her school fresh
Yeah.
through the experience of a kid. So
Great idea.
So as we wrap up, thank you, Principal Matters listeners, for just letting us chew on that question about how do we manage performance and expectations in a way that we're touching the people and the system side. Jen Schwanke, thank you for your leadership. Thanks for being a part of this conversation. And until next time, thanks for doing what matters.
Thanks, everyone. Talk soon.
You'll find free resources like this one at williamdparker.com. Subscribe for our free weekly newsletter, which contains bonus material, and also check out the links for Grow Academies, Masterminds, Executive Coaching, and Keynote presentations from my books, as well as from Principal Matters Associates. You can find out more under our speakers tab at williamdparker.com. Thank you for learning together, and thank you for doing what matters.